Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure.
So welcome, Christine Valeska, to the Adventures of Self.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I feel that, sometimes when I get started in conversations here, there's a sense of kind of going for it, really early and kind of getting to something. And there's a sense here that we have an opportunity to just kind of relax into a conversation. We were talking before we got started recording about how we can just be. There's an aliveness in our ability to be. And here we are in a moment recording. Here are some listeners listening to us in this moment, to just be and be alive in that.
Yes. Yeah, I like to call it like relaxing deeper into myself. It's really a letting go. It's a dropping into what is alive in me right now, and what is expressing through this in the moment when I let go, when I don't plan, when I don't try to get anywhere, but just open a space for life to come through very easily, very simple.
It's interesting because there's a tension that comes in, of feeling like, it has to be something. We have to have a plan, an agenda, and I think there is this that tension is quite good, because it brings us to this space of being alive, and yet, rather than our learned tendency, and we can get into some of what we've learned as we move forward, but our learned tendency is to then have to do something. Well, I have this number of things to do on my list today or this week, so let me just put all that energy into it. And there's, like you say, there's I like that idea of kind of dropping the things, because it's not to say there aren't things that we choose to or have to do on our list, but letting some of that go, dropping some of that away, brings us into a place of awareness and presence and what's really being called for by our individual expression.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's not a passive state, or it's not something that then will just lead to like a flat line, nothing is happening. It's the opposite. In my experience, is it takes some courage maybe to drop deeper, but then the way life flows through me naturally is very powerful, and it's not passive at all, but then it's effortless in a way. It's a non-doing in the doing, and it's it comes from a different place, where it's not about fulfilling a concept or following an idea of this is the right way to do it, and because this will always be a reflection of how I saw it in someone else, or what I was taught, or what I think would be the right thing to do or say right now. But instead, it's allowing authenticity and spontaneity, which is it's beautiful, and it's very alive, and it's there's a lot of energy behind it that can shift something and transform something, in my experience.
Yeah, and I think that sense of, because what was coming to me is that when you talk about that sense of authenticity, that sort of non-doing, doing, there is this yeah, as you say, we're not flatlining. We're not just sitting in caves meditating for the rest of our lives, although maybe that works for some. And if you're listening to this while you're meditating in a cave, all better for you. I was just talking to somebody today about this sort of yin yang dance, and there's there's this balance that I think we are being called to in our individual lives, in the world today. There's great things come from action and doing, but doing without awareness, without connection, without authenticity, can be frantic and quite destructive. I think it can be seen in a lot of what we see, and even in our own doing, on a personal level and a cultural and societal level. And so what we're talking about, this listening, there's a listening to what it is that's true, that's authentic for Christina, and what's true and authentic for Taylor in a particular moment.
Right.
And then when we choose to come together at a point like this, it's like, well, then how does that start to weave together? And that listening, like, really is there's a challenge to it, because in my own mind, there's a part of me that feels like, oh, I've got to fix this. I've got to say this better. It's like you say, live up to my mother's expectation, my school teacher's expectation, my girlfriend's whoever it is, my shopkeeper, whatever, my gym trainer's expectation, all these things that come in, and to be able to hear those, but also to have this opportunity to really listen to and receive a deeper truth inside of me at a particular moment, and with that, to really go forward in action.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. For me, it's a connection to the soul, but the wording can be different for everyone. But for me, I feel that there's this knowing and this wisdom inside of me that is actually unaffected by conditioning and all these ideas of expectations from the outside. And it's not fighting it or it's just there and ready and waiting for, in a way, the way I see it inside of myself, it's just getting out of my own way and allowing this to flow through. And then there's a power behind that I think that we have not explored a lot as humankind so far, that is beyond what we see on this planet, also in the way it can create beauty and change in a very beautiful way and a very beneficial way. Because everything that I experience from soul in myself and also in other people, it's so deeply connected to love and to service, and there's nothing to fear, and there's also nothing to fear in a way that I will not hurt people from there. I will not destroy things in the way we see it on the planet. It's the opposite, but it's quite a journey to get back there and stay there or live from there, because of all of the expectations, conditionings, ideas, and also it takes a lot of courage. It's a pioneering work, because there is no one who will be like you, and there's no chance that we can like follow in someone else's footsteps the whole time. It's just not. It's so unique from what I see that we're all pioneers in the expression of life through this form in this moment. And this is very alive and very courageous to allow more of it to come through.
I think that's really nice, that sense, like we are pioneers. And oftentimes people can recognize that even, I know a few set of twins, right? And so they're the kind of people that kind of have had the most similar experience on the planet, and even genetically they have the most similar material, and yet there are a few sets of twins I know, and some are very similar, but you can obviously still see the distinction in them, and some are radically different,
Yes.
and so even in something like that, right, where you recognize that people are individuals, and Christina has her background and heritage and life experiences, Taylor has his, so of course they're different, and we look different, we come from different places, like all these things, and yet there is this sense, like you're saying, that like it's very obvious that we're unique, but we don't really celebrate that there's the things that really make us unique. Often we try to hide,
Right.
and because you were, one thing you said earlier is this sense of soul that's always coming through. Now, say I know what exists as a fact in terms of soul, but or not, but it but it's definitely a premise of something that I use that fits the model I have of the world, that I have a soul, you have a soul. I can't prove that that's true, and so whether it's soul or heart or spirit, or again, like words can confuse us, but like you say, getting out of your own way, we have all this conditioning, this expectation that we have learned, and some of it's very useful. Some convention, it's like, well, everybody drives on this side of the road or the other side of the road, depending on where you are. This is, some things are very useful from a sort of orderly perspective,
Yes.
and yet in ourselves, the opportunities that come from really being connected to, and it goes back to that listening, to really allowing that whatever Christina came here to be on this planet, that allowing that to come through, and allowing that exploration in yourself, and I'd like to maybe even get into some stories, that we've kind of been very abstract and heady in this, and I think it's useful to bring in, because I know, like you've similar to me, like a bit of a global adventurer, and been on many paths, and for me, I don't have a sense of, oh, I have arrived. I do have a sense that, wow, some of the things I did in the past were really, really amazing, and they've shown me what I'm willing to spend more time on and go into more. And some of the things I've done in the past, I realized, wow, that really was not authentic, and I'm really glad I tried them and either failed at them or realized that they weren't something for me, because now I can really focus my energy into what is true for me.
Yes, yeah, beautiful. I can totally relate, and I was reflecting on maybe you could say, like, what started this. I'm always interested in, when I have conversations with people, I always ask them, what brought you on the path? What did something start this, or what brought the biggest shift, or and reflecting back in my own life, I remember as a child in my family that I felt very, I actually felt like being born in the wrong family. I think many people can relate to that. I was like wondering, maybe they switched babies in the hospital. Something must have gone totally wrong here. And from that, I think it started that I was interested in how come that I'm different from my parents' expectations, from their idea of how they want me to be, and also from my brothers and the way they were interacting with my parents and with life. And I could see a lot of difference, and I was very curious about these differences, and where can this come from? And so this was some interest that was always there, studying people and their differences, and especially within families, also of my friends and so on. I always tried to find a pattern or an understanding or an answer to these experiences. And then I had this early entrance in a way to this path in a deeper way when I read an article about Buddhist meditation retreats in my early 20s. And it said that there's an opportunity for Westerners to come to Thailand to stay in the traditional Buddhist monastery, being taught by the monks in meditation. And it's an 11-day silent retreat without books, without music, without eye contact, without any spoken word from your side. And then came this sentence that got me, and that shifted my path on this in this life in the most intense way that I could imagine so far. It was saying that many people don't make it to the end of these 11 days because they are confronted with things inside of themselves that they didn't know that were there, and they cannot be with it. They cannot be with themselves in silence. And this was, for me, this was like, I have to go there. I had no idea about meditation. I thought I had no idea about meditation. I remembered a lot when I was there, but no training in that, no training in yoga and meditation, anything in that. I had not written a single, did not read a book about it, nothing. So I went there just to find out whether I would survive 11 days with myself. And it turned out in that moment to be the best time of my life. And it was totally the opposite of my expectation. For the reason maybe that I remembered a lot of what I was doing there. So it was a remembering, coming back to to an experience of myself in meditation and in silence that was really beautiful for me. And also an understanding that I got in contact with a lot of things in my mind that I didn't know that it was there. All these thoughts, all these judgments about people just walking by, like all these things in my head was doing the whole day. I got aware of them, and I could see there's a way to change it, to not continue like this. This was important for me to see, oh, this is like this right now, but I could also see while sitting there, while reflecting on it, while being aware of it, something started to change. I was not a slave to this anymore, or like this was not running the show all the time. The old pattern in my head, the sentences, the thoughts, the way of looking at life, and that got me. That was the starting point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've learned from my own meditation practice is, and I really appreciated this, like, I think I've mentioned on this podcast before, but I certainly had a notion when I heard about meditation, so I'd be interested to hear yours as well. But I had this notion that I had to get to a very pure, this zazen bliss state where everything was, nothing, and I was, completely free of all this baggage and thought, and I found myself, for I don't know, probably the first years that I meditated, quite frustrated with myself, and I had some beautiful moments, but I was really trying hard to get to some place within meditation. And I think, whatever I tried in the beginning for, several months or a year or so, probably back in my 20s. I gave up quite quickly because I felt that I wasn't good at it. I had this real judgment. Oh, I'm not good at this because I'm not getting to where I'm supposed to get, whatever supposed to meant. But in my mind, there was this sense of, yes, there is a destination and I've got to get to this place. And then when I get to that place, I will be a good meditator, then maybe a really good or an excellent meditator, and all these senses. And it was years, and I don't know, maybe even decades later, that I heard this very, I think there's different forms of meditation, but for me, I heard somebody say, well, the point of meditation is not to get rid of any of that thought. It's to just become critically aware of what's going on. I was speaking to somebody about thought recently, and sort of, like neuroscientists today, right? They read textbooks or these kind of like popular science books that are around, and neuroscientists can track like where a thought goes, like from your orbital frontal lobe to your neocortex, or they can track where the signal goes, but where it comes from, we still have no idea where a thought actually comes from. And there are these moments that I've found in meditation where I got this one book I was reading last year that was talking about, there is this idea. It's like, yes, you go to where there's a crystal lake and there's no movement, but quickly, very, very quickly, imperceptibly, that crystal lake gets muddied. And so even if for a tiny split second, there's this moment of like, oh, okay, I don't really have a thought. Within a millisecond, within a very short period of time, another thought will come, and it seems very random. It's like, why am I thinking about cheese? Why am I thinking about my sneakers when I was 5 years old? They come out of anywhere, and so there was this, and I think it's to your point about like, well, there's all these thoughts, but rather than there's this opportunity to see them as maybe a coding, as a process, as hear what you learn from this, but that it doesn't fundamentally determine who you are and what's possible for you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. For me, it was. I need awareness to have a choice. It doesn't have to be silent in there. It's just to be awake enough to have a choice of how to deal with it, how to react, what's the next move from that? Is this controlling my life? Is this driving, like, is it in the driver's seat of the car? Is this what I want to live? Is this my choice? Or is it just the repetition or something automatic that was happening? And for me, it opened this window, liberation and freedom of choice. I can choose. I don't have to repeat it. Like for me, the most scary thing was from my childhood was, what if I repeat what they do? I don't want to repeat this, And I could see that in my parents. I could see they repeat what was done to them in their childhood, and it was not nice. And I wanted to know how to get out of this, like saying like, this ends with me, but how, And I needed awareness, just to be awake enough, aware enough to make a different choice. It doesn't mean that the thoughts are not there, or that there's silence all the time, or bliss, or total peace, which is nice if it's there, and it's so beautiful to have that in meditation. And I had some moments also, especially in my first retreat, because I was so innocent. I was not expecting anything. I heard the word bliss for the first time. I didn't even know the vocabulary. I had no German word for that. And I was not allowed to look into a dictionary during the retreat. So I can only look it up afterwards, what bliss meant. But I realized I was in states of bliss during my first retreat because I had no expectation, and I was not looking for that state. I was just trying to understand myself, and I was really trying to see whether I have something inside of me that could be dangerous in a way to the way I wanted to live, or for other people, or yeah, I wanted to see the demons inside of me, and I also met them on the way, like all the shadows and all of that. But in the first retreat, in a way, it was a lot of this feeling of empowerment. It was a feeling of empowerment. I'm not a slave to this, because I can be aware. I can see them. I see what's happening in meditation, and then I have a choice from there.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there is often a sense, because you speak about demons, and the thought that came to me was, we demonize our demons.
Yes.
Quite funny. And in many spiritual practices, there's a sense of really getting to know your demon. I mean, the old traditions, people talk about slaying your dragon, killing your demons, and all this, but that is, from my understanding, in literature and in mythology, is a relatively recent concept that maybe only goes back 500 or 600 years. But because if you look at mythology going back thousands of years, the demons in particular myths were not killed; they were pacified. So you make peace with them, and in order to make peace with them, you got to get to know them. And yes, because we think that the monster under the bed, or in the closet, or deep inside the recesses of our unconscious is going to come out and kill us, or kill somebody very close and dear to us. And so we learn culturally, socially, and in all these ways to deny, to push those things down, to deny that we even have them. And whether it's individually, or I think probably collectively, they come out. And in my perspective, that's what we're seeing a lot of in the world, because we're not actually integrating what is a natural part of us, which is to maybe have a demon, but the demon gets the power if we don't tend to it. If we don't go to that dark land and make peace with that dragon, with the demon, it will run amok.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about integration. Everything that we separate and suppress, and it costs so much energy on the one side to do that. It's part of our life force energy that is also inside the demon, but also putting it outside, or holding it under control, or covering it up, or whatever we do with it. It's so energy consuming. And it doesn't, also for the body, it doesn't make sense in my work. It's not good for our health to do that. And because it costs us a lot. And also it's really it's the other way around. It's like you say, it's a part of me. There's also wisdom in it. There's a story, there are emotions, there are a lot of emotions stored in that, that just want to be part of the bigger us again. And there's also where awareness comes in, because then I have a choice what to do with this energy. Maybe if you say it's a strong energy of anger or something like that, it's a life force energy. There's nothing bad about it or wrong about it. It's one frequency of life in a human body, of emotional body, and there's a lot of power in it. Without it, we cannot set boundaries. We cannot say a clear yes or a clear no. So we need the energy that is stored in them, and it's about reintegrating and it's like dropping them back into ourselves, the demons that were put outside and pushed out of the door, and we try to keep the door closed, try to keep them in the basement, and then they run the show from there. Exactly, because it's it's impossible to do that. Life will not tolerate, as we see also, it will not tolerate anything being pushed into the basement and hidden. That is part of life. It's not possible.
Yeah, and you talk about how this shows up in your work, because I know you do body work, and I'd like to maybe look at how this shows up, because I can see it in my own self, but I'm very interested to talk to somebody who works with the body and who's created a body practice that has you can talk about the various lineages and trainings that you have, but I know as well that there's an intuitive sense of kind of creating your own sense and being with what the body wants to express, right? I mean, I had on very early on this podcast, it was the second episode, a very good friend of mine who is a doctor, and has been a GP for 35 years, so has that medical training, but comes at things from a very holistic sense, and it goes to this idea about like how we understand what's happening within us. And I think for many Western educated people, we learn that there's this thing that happens in our mind, there's this thing that happens in our body, there's this thing that happens in our emotions, and it's like they're three different planets. And we're only starting to really get a sense. I mean, many individuals have this, but on a collective sense of how connected. And when you stop to think about it, it's like, well, of course they're connected. Like what's happening emotionally, how could that not impact, where, what shows up in your body or in your mind? And so it's, this idea of actually then doing body work, whether through yourself or with a practitioner, to help move energies to really become aware of where things are stuck and what that is about.
Yes. Yeah. It's beautiful, because what I found in my work, and I was guided in a way towards this without knowing, by first teaching or like practicing yoga for many years and teaching yoga, and then being at a point where I decided to work one-on-one with people and do yoga therapy. And that led me to a point where I had a lot of focus on one person and a lot of time to feel into them, breathe with them, and touch them. And then a lot of things opened up in me of informations, the way of seeing that I realized that I've always had, of seeing the body different, maybe a bit different than other people see it. It goes like it's a vision that goes underneath the skin, and that has images and informations of where something is flowing and where it's stuck, and it has different structures underneath that show where we put things, where the body is so sweet, it's so kind and so innocent in a way, and it tries to be a vessel for the things that we didn't know what to do with. In a way, it was overwhelming, it was too much of a certain emotion or a traumatic experience, we could call it, and the body was just so open and willing to store it, to hold it, to keep it under control. But then, as I said, it costs us a lot, and there are things that are not taken care of as well as they could be, health-wise, then for the body. So things cannot function, cannot flow, cannot pulsate. Life wants to pulsate the whole time, and in these areas where we store something emotional or intense that happened, it's not pulsating in the same way. And then this is work that I started, and or the way I became an instrument in a way, allowing my senses to work in that way and my hands to work in that way, to liberate or support the flow of energy out of these areas. And this often comes out as intense emotions, pains, screams. Sometimes they come out through me because it needs someone who is, or like a, it's also like being an instrument, like a musical instrument. It needs someone who's ready to express it, and then the person remembers. It's very interesting because we remember the energy, the frequency, especially in pure sounds of emotions, like really pure expressed sounds of a certain emotion activate a lot in people. If we hear people like in a sound of fear or rage or sadness, if it's pure, we feel it in every cell, and it goes through all the walls. You feel it in the distance, and there is a intelligence in that, to liberate the stuck energy, or allow life to flow again, and then the body reacts. Also, it releases, it heals itself, we could say, because it's
Yeah, I mean, in this, I think, may go beyond our training, but not necessarily beyond our experience. And I don't think even the greatest scientists still don't have a real sense of, like I say, we don't know where thought comes from. We don't know how this healing process actually happens, and yet, I mean, even sitting here now, like, okay, we're consciously sitting here and paying attention and in conversation, and kind of semi-consciously moving my hands and thinking about what to say next, and yet there are thousands or millions of processes that are going on inside my body right now that are just on autopilot, that I'm not even aware of. Some digestion, some there's an excess protein here that needs to be dealt with, that I cut myself the other day, and so there's a wound underneath my foot. I stepped on a rock, and so there's all sorts of things that are going to rebuild that skin. Now, that may take a few days or a couple of weeks, I don't know, and I don't have to put conscious effort into that. I mean, this system, this structure is, I mean, it is truly a miracle, right? That we have this, and I think, certainly in my experience, and I had a very skeptical notion of particularly alternative health, I think, and yet have had experiences of the body's ability to heal, or I don't have another explanation for it. Now, I'll give a quick example. I was hit by a car when I was a child. I was about 10 years old. I walked across the street, and a car came around the corner and hit me. And so hit me on the side, on the pelvis. I went up over the car hood and then rolled off. So it cracked my pelvis, broke my thumb, and I was 10 years old. So in a way, I'm fortunate. I don't have any permanent, I don't know if I have permanent brain damage or not. Other people can decide that. But I didn't have any, major damage. It took me, I was, sort of lying in bed for many weeks to heal my hip. And because this happened, particularly because this happened a couple of years before puberty, my body then, when it went into puberty, went through all the changes, growth, muscular changes that it was going to do, but it was doing so in essentially a lopsided body. I didn't know it at the time. There wasn't a lot of physio being done. It was just like, well, take a rest and you'll be okay. But in my mid-teens, I was already starting to have back pain, and to feel that things were off. I mean, I really struggled with running in sports, particularly in a straight line. I could do more dynamic things, but running in a straight line was really challenging. And I started to have really significant back pain. I mean, in my late teens, and really because I hadn't really processed or remembered that's what had happened, and that's why I had to sort of put it out of my mind. And I was in my mid-20s and was having really significant back pain. And I went to go see a chiropractor for the first time. And the person, kind of gets you on the table, measured me up, and said, "Wow, did you know that your left leg is 1.5 inches longer than your right leg, like 3.5, 4 centimeters or something like that, longer?" And he said, "I've never seen anything quite that pronounced." And at the time he said, "Do you have any significant issues?" No. And I kind of completely blanked out that I'd had this accident, and we kind of identified it. And so I was very aware of very significant chronic pain and dealt with that for years and even a couple of decades. And I was fortunate enough, I came across a craniosacral osteopath who's still my doctor in London. And, he started with craniosacral doing very light touch. I'd gone to a chiropractor, and if chiropractors work for people, that's great. I wouldn't use it for my ailments because it's very, very hard and kind of throwing people around and heavy manipulation. And it did provide some relief. But when I first went to go see a craniosacral therapist, here was somebody I would lay on the table and they would kind of move their fingers very slightly. And I would think, well, this is not really doing any good. This is a bit of a waste. And yet I would get up and I would walk around the room and say, I feel markedly different. I don't know what just happened in the last hour. It doesn't feel like you did anything. And yet I can recognize a physical difference in me. And he told me, because we worked together for years, he spoke about how for years and years, he felt that the left hip, the pelvis that had taken the impact had so much trauma that it had kind of turned off, and it felt deadened, felt wooden, kind of dead. And that after years and years, it started to have life force running back through it, that enough of the trauma had been released that it could start to take back in natural flowing energy. And I still have some issues, but I am better now, 30, 40 years later from the accident than I was 5 years after it. And I was seeing somebody here recently on even sort of more kind of esoteric biodynamic osteopathy, which really gets into sort of more the shouting, the screaming, and just allowing emotion to come out, as you say, either through me as the client or through the practitioner. So it's fascinating because it goes to that point. It's like the body wants to heal itself, and if you allow it, and you're holding space for that to happen.
Exactly, yeah. And it's also, like you say, it's not so much about how long has this been, and then it will not take the same amount of time to get back to the state of pulsation, of flow, of aliveness, as soon as it gets a chance, and in a way. And what I see in bodies is that they really like if we listen to them. And we don't listen to, I meet bodies, and it's like no one ever listened. And how would it, for us as a human being, if you feel like no one ever listened to you, they just run over you, they just take advantage, and they're not listening. And the moment is also what cranio in a way does, listening to this very fine pulsation and very fine signals. The body loves that, it loves if we start to tune into it, just allowing it to express in its language, in its way, what it needs. Often the other side, we have one side that's been injured, and it holds a lot of tension and scar tissue, and a lot of attention went into the side with the injury, and then the other side is totally neglected in a way, and unable to hold it anymore. And then just listening to the both sides. That's a lot what I do, is also to listen to both sides of the body. It also has, of course, to do also with our masculine and feminine aspects and things like that, but just to, it's like an inner conversation. What's going on inside of this body? How's the atmosphere? How's the communication? How's the relationship inside, between the body and parts of the body, or what we call parts of the body? But it's also just the human concept, like you were saying earlier. We have an arm and a leg, and then we have emotions. But who said that? It's just the human way to put names to make it, we can grab it, we can communicate it, but it's not true. And when I was teaching yoga, I always tried to expand our awareness of getting out of this idea of body parts and of separation. It reflects a lot of what we experience on the world, on this world, is too much separation. We like to separate things, and I like to structure and order things. I love it, but I can see also the downside, especially in the life systems like the body. If we start separating and just moving one part of the body, even by the way yoga classes or exercises are guided, that can enforce in a way, or like make it even more intense, the separation of, now we move this arm or this leg, but it's really opening up for the awareness. Where does the movement really come from? Do I find an end to this? Do I find a starting point of this? To really explore, just by this exploration, something opens up inside of us, because the body realizes, oh, someone is curious. There's a curiosity, there's an interest coming in, there's awareness, and where awareness goes, energy goes. So if I'm aware of where's my right arm starting, if I lift it, where does it come from? Is it really the shoulder, or where is it, like in the body? How deep can I feel it? And then something is really happening. We can heal, like we would say, like heal ourselves or support our well-being so easily by attention, by curiosity, by, yes, like really going in there and being curious. What we call our body, what is it really in this moment? What can you feel? What can you sense? How do you know you're alive right now? All of this, it shifts something. It creates a new relationship, a new openness. Like boundaries or barriers that we created in these mental concepts, they dissolve, and then it supports healing.
Yeah, I love that sense of like where because we do, and certainly for me in my masculine mind, it's like, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to work on this one thing, my leg day, or do push-ups for my chest, or something like that. And I had this I took a somatic body flow class recently, and it was really beautiful, because it's like when you said something about, like, where does moving something, so say you move you move your arm, and you think, well, okay, this is probably starting at the shoulder. And the facilitator said, okay, well, we were laying down, and it was like, okay, fine, do this in a particular way. But when you focused on, going down to the if I'm trying to raise, say, my right arm lying on my front, well, we can do that just as a singular motion. But when you engage the opposite leg, the left leg, it's like, oh, wow, this makes it, I have this much more mobility or strength. And you realize, yeah, I mean, like, the body doesn't think, okay, well, there's this is the right arm, and therefore this is what this does. There are different aspects to us, our different like endings, and organs, and all these things, but the body has a, they all work together, right? I mean, we can't, you don't go very far without that sense of, and you were talking about that sense of integration. And also, I just want to bring in, because you spoke about integration and the sense of remembering. And I want to get to that, because it's come up a couple times recently, what it means, because you were talking about how the first time you went to this meditation you were remembering things.
Yeah.
So that sort of seems quite curious, because on the one hand, it's the first time you're doing something. So what is it that you're remembering?
What I realized afterwards, because I had no books about meditation or anything before that, and I had a lot of difficulties to understand the Thai monks, because they had taught themselves some English to teach Westerners, but for me, with the German background, my English was not enough to understand what they were trying to tell us, really. And so I was sitting there for many hours in different meditations, sitting meditation, standing meditation, walking meditation, the whole day. I mean, basically the whole day was a continuous repetition of 1 hour standing, 1 hour sitting, 1 hour walking, and 1 hour sitting again. So it was like I had a lot of time to drop deeper into this experience of what I was doing there without a lot of instruction, because I didn't get the instruction so much. And then I realized afterwards, starting to read books about it, that I had been doing exactly what was written in the books, about how to work with sensations, the reflections that they were talking about, especially in this Theravadan Buddhism, so the Thai lineage. So there must have been some information stored inside of me, knowing this tradition, this lineage, without any context in this lifetime. No one in my family, my surrounding, I hadn't heard the word meditation, yoga, anything in my life before. In a way, there was no one practicing anything. And so this was very empowering also for me to realize, wow, this was already there inside of me. I knew what I had to do, and it was also the way of reflecting on the sensations, scanning the body, being aware of the different experiences as a way to change the reactive patterns I have to experiences. Like, for example, those flies. It was an outdoor area in Thailand in the jungle. So it was a lot of flies, a lot of mosquitoes, while you were sitting in meditation, where you were supposed to sit as still as possible, with flies landing on you and sweat dropping and all of that. And there was this remembering inside of me of, oh, if I go deeper into that, and really allow myself to experience it to the detail, what is it really, like a fly landing on my face? How does it really feel, and how is it shifting and changing? And this allowed me to break the habitual pattern of like making a movement, like brushing it away or not being able to focus anymore. On the contrary, it made me concentrate and focus even more and go deeper into a deeper state of being in the now, like really being in that experience, not labeling it, oh, this is just a fly, but what is it really? What is that feeling? And also, then you feel it and it's still, the fly is already gone, you still feel it. What is that? You know, it's like, you still have this experience in the body, and it's traveling inside, or the knees are hurting. I had no experience or not training and sitting cross-legged for hours. My body was really hurting. And working with body sensations and not labeling it pain that needs me to move, but being more curious about what's really happening there. So it was a remembering, and in a way also training for what I do now. But it was this, yeah, I think I had this in many situations in my life since then, that I could see that something was stored in me, some knowing, some wisdom, some understanding that did not come in as information in this lifetime, but it was already there. It's difficult to put it in other words than that.
I mean, it's a really beautiful concept, and I think, maybe challenging for some. There's a book I use, particularly in the men's work that I do that was written about the archetypes that the Greek gods represent. It was written by a woman who was a Jungian analyst. It's called Gods and Every Man. She wrote a book called Goddesses and Every Woman as well, and it's this idea of, you know, take the pantheon of gods and goddesses and see what these represent, right? And it's interesting, fascinating books on their own, and I really love them for what she provides and describes as a template. You know, it's not that this is fact or law. It's just it's a way of seeing things. And one of the things she talks about is, which I think is a beautiful concept, is remembering is a way of putting back together. That she talks about the Procrustean, I can't remember. Anyway, the Procrustes, I think, is a Procrustean bed, which is a concept from ancient Greece. So there was a road from Athens to I can't remember, somewhere outside of Athens, and on that road, apparently there was a man, Procrustes, who because it was a long road, would allow people to stay in his inn overnight. But there was only one bed, and it was only one size. And so people that were too tall or too something for that, he would actually, you know, cut them down to size. And people that were too short, he would stretch them out to fit. And so it has this idea of, you know, it's this conformity. It's like, well, in order to be this part, you have to be stretched or cut down to size. And she gives this example to say what we've, you know, the society we've created, and how in a way what we've done is we have dismembered who we are as individuals, right? Christina is, who Taylor is. And when we start to integrate all these aspects to us, you know, our genius, our demons, our really boring traits that, you know, are just kind of like what we do every day, that, you know, looks a little simple and is quite boring, and we don't even like it, you know. But when we integrate all those, it's like we're putting the Humpty Dumpty back together. We're remembering. We're putting all the separate members of our body. So it's, oh, here's the arm back, here's the leg back. Now this is the whole integrated everything. This is my you know, connection to Zeus or Aphrodite or whatever, in whatever aspects that is. And this gives us a sense of who we are as a whole. Because I think that then what you can do, then you're back to your sense of having choice, right? When you see all those aspects of, oh, well, here's a feeling, here's a thought. When you have the awareness of all that you are, it gives you, you know, it gives you choice about what to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives us, it's a joy in that, like coming back together. It's such a deep joy, especially on the soul level. I feel that it's this joy of coming back together, really, and because then something really starts. It's this feeling that I have, or this in my work, that I see that we have so many potentials that we're not living yet, and we see this in other people more easily than we see it in ourselves. But it's true for everyone, and it has to do with that we would have a different situation on this planet, different life experience, when the moment people would be remembering themselves and living from there, because I can just feel it has a sense of this power, of this energy that is there in a human being, and the potentials that we have, and that we have not even a clue of what we can do. There's so much more that we can do. The moment that we allow energies to flow through us freely, and they're not suppressed, they're not separated or whatever, like controlled, manipulated, put under pressure, all these things that we do that distort our natural power that we have, and create a lot of friction and a lot of weird things that we see, and it's also unhealthy. And the moment this comes back to the natural expression, then there's something that we have not experienced yet, and this is what I'm super curious about, and like dedicated to in a way in my work, in my service, is to embody soul. And this is like really to bring the two together in a way that if we see it as two, like body and soul, or soul having a body. You were saying it earlier, like, yeah, maybe we have this idea that we all have a soul. I would say my soul has a body, and maybe it has more than one, I don't know, but one of them is sitting here as Christina Valeska. So yeah, it's like what I'm dedicating my work and my service to is to explore what this is, to embody soul and the potential behind it, because I have this has like this 100% trust that there's such a beauty, such a love, such a kindness, and transformational power in that I want to see on this planet. I want this to rule the world.
Yeah,
and not
beautiful.
the distortion that we have at the moment.
Well, I think that is one of the things we're being called to. And I love this sense, because it's bandied around a bit. You see it on like memes and quotes and things, like you're not a body having a spiritual experience. You're a spirit having a human experience, or whatever. And you're not a body with a soul. You're a soul with a body. And it's like, okay, fine, that sounds good, but then how do you live that? How do you really bring that beyond just a few words on your phone, or that you write down, or have on a fridge magnet or something? And really listening to you in the experience, working with bodies and through yoga and through physical practice, and in a healing way, to allow your sense of touch to work through people. Because what I hear from you is this, we've been speaking about it from the beginning, this sense of connection to soul, and really relaxing into that, and that soul, you're talking about getting out of your own way, that soul wants to come through. The individual expression of Christina Valeska has been sort of crying out at least since birth, and probably since conception, and possibly even before that, if we want to get really crazy about it. But anyway, it's going on for quite a while. And so that's a soul expression. And this sense about embodying that, about bringing that into your body. And as we say, that's not just the voice, that's not just your hands, that's not just your hips or your head or anything. It's the wholeness of that, of bringing that soul into all of your body. And as we were saying, then embodying, the genius that you have, embodying the demons that you have, embodying the mundane, boring things that you have, because it's all part of the fullness of your expression.
Absolutely. And it needs the embodiment. This is why we got a body, whether we see it this way around or the other, but to bring the energy and the potential, the full potential of this energy into form, into expression, into interaction on this planet, needs the physical body and needs this form and needs it to be alive and pulsating. And it's this really like dropping deeper into the body. And what I see and many of my colleagues as well in this work with trauma and other things is that people really energetically slip out of their body with when something happens. Similar to what you said, part of your hip was kind of dead. It was not alive anymore. So you were not home. There was no one home in that part of your hip. And that is also part of your ability to move, to bend, to stand on both feet. So it has an effect to, like you were saying, to the length of your leg, but also to the way you were grounded, your feeling of standing in your own power. So it has so many ripple effects that are not little in the end. It's not a simple thing. The fact that we moved out of our hip or out of some other part in the body because of accident, trauma, injury, many different things. Birth, sometimes I work with babies after birth. It's not that it's so easy to get into this world. So sometimes we're not even really in that body when we are born. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, and what I've found, because I think that you're saying the what I get is that the body is giving us signals. And actually, as you say, embodying soul, that whether I like it or not, there is a sense about this, reintegrating this part of me. The hip is it, like you said, there's this very foundational, like, what's my standing, what's my grounding? And if I look at my past from age 10 when this happened, and maybe was there before, to where I am now, the reintegration of who I am, how I stand in this world, as you said, right? I mean, the left side, we didn't really get into this sort of feminine, masculine, or receptive, active principles in our lives. I can see how all of this has resonance in what else is happening in my life, or has happened in my life, in my personal life, in my professional life. And what I get is that there is, that sense. It's like, this is one of the things that, in this earthly experience, the reason we have a body is to kind of give us those signals. Well, this is what our soul journey is calling for. And there's a lot in my standing and sexuality, in my ability to go forward, that I see playing out throughout all areas of my life, and that have been there, which also goes to what you were talking about, this idea of healing. If I look at my mother's journey, if I look at my father's journey, what they brought into the world, what they created, and the lineages that they have, it all comes to me, and then what do I choose to do with that information in this body? How do I heal that for myself, and maybe for my community, my family, my world?
Yes. Yeah. And it starts with this awareness. You were saying earlier with the memes, all these sentences, this beautiful, if we just pick one, and really go for it, this is so powerful. It's an awareness it's a choice to pick something like that, like this idea of, okay, I am a soul having this experience through the body. How can I turn my focus inwards and really explore myself, be curious about who is this, that I call Christina Valeska. What is going on in there? It's we have all that we need. You know, it's about awareness. It's about focus and willpower. I would say, like to choose something and to go for it. It's supported by life. It's listening. You know, what we say, what we're ready for, what we want to go for, what, you know, also saying like, okay, I see this has been happening in my family, but this ends with me. I don't know how, but I go for this, you know, I give it all I can give, even not knowing what that means. It's super powerful. And then things come into your life that support this. I see it in people around me. The moment they start this journey of self-exploration or re-empowering themselves by taking a stand, making a new choice, stepping out of an old pattern, things shift. They meet different people, therapists, books fall into your hands, you know, all of that. It's the grace that is happening, but it starts with us. Something has to spark from us. That's what I see too. And it might have been like, also when I talk with people about what started your journey, there might have been 20 other books or informations that you didn't even see. They just, you know, but life tried to, or divine tried to wake you up in that, like, remember. And then at some point, suddenly this book, oh, okay. And you start reading it. So I also found out that I had a book about Buddhist meditation in my possession from years before. I never opened it, but I had it before going to the monastery. I had it from some friend who'd been traveling, whatever. And I liked the cover. I liked the cover, this image, and it was about being here now, something. And I had this, you know, it was the way, like, life was already trying to put me on a path, but I did not see it in that moment. And it respects our free will and whenever we are ready. But the moment we can see that, we get that information, that it's about choice, and we make a choice, we're supported beyond what we can imagine.
Yes, I agree with that. And again, I had a very, very skeptical, linear, yang way of thinking of how to succeed or how to be in life. And when I started on my own adventures, it is amazing when somebody posted recently as a comment. It was a former guest who posted a comment on something from a post, and it was a quote from Terence McKenna, who talked about when we take a leap into the unknown, and how we're being called to that. And you know, we assume on our simple egoic human level that if we take a leap into the unknown, it is literally like walking off a cliff, and we will certainly fall to our death. And there's find it in somewhere on our page. But what happens actually is when you take that leap, when you walk off that cliff of the unknown, and it's a path of the heart, right? We're not saying like, well, just go do something stupid, like, well, I'm just going to jump off a real cliff and see what happens, right? But when it's a path of the heart, when your soul calls you to do something, and it will be scary, there will be a part of you that says, no, we don't know what's going to happen. That invariably what happens is at the bottom of that drop, there's just a feather bed waiting and holding.
Yes.
And you know, I found this recently in my own life where, I mean, starting this podcast, starting my own business, everything was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to fail. I'm going to, you know, be penniless and living on the streets. I don't know, maybe that'll still happen. But when I, you know, move towards my unknown, and there is a truth to it. It's, you know, re-inhabiting a part of, you know, remembering part of my soul's journey. The things that come in the connections, the people that I meet, the sort of the gifts that sort of come to me are to beyond imagination. You start to think, well, it's almost like you're in this sort of fairy tale land. It's like, how is this possible? Like, how are these connections happening? And of course, every time, I was thinking about this recently, every time I come to a new point, something has come up recently, and I really felt like, oh, okay, this is going to be whatever happened in the past, that was all fine, but now this time it's death. And it was a reminder of, oh, this is what always happens. Now, maybe this time it will be certain to happen. This will be the last episode I record, because I step into an unknown of my heart, and I fail. But there is a sense like, okay, right, that's a pattern, and maybe there's an egoic reason for survival and all that to keep me safe. But when I really do follow this adventure and follow my own path of heart, that remembering, that reintegration of the demons and facing and pacifying those demons, what I have experienced is being met, as you say, with grace, with connections, with love, with bliss beyond imagination.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not always easy. I mean, it's also important to, in my experience, my own experience, and also supporting people through this process, the moment we come back into contact with our soul, we come into contact with a lot of feelings that were unfelt, suppressed. And also what I see is there is a certain quality of, we could call it sadness or pain around that fact that we were not living our truth, and that we were ignoring, or also out of no contact, real contact with the soul, doing a lot of things that were not good to others, not good for ourselves. And it's stored. It's also stored around the soul, and it's part of the journey back to walk through this. There is a lot of things written about the dark night of the soul, of experiences that really go deep and that are not easy to travel through. But it is, in a way, a part of the journey that we meet also, that the more we get real or closer to this inner truth, this frequency of us, then all the unlove and the things done and said and out of this distortion, it's stored somewhere. So it's not easy, but it's not a bad sign also. This is something that I want to emphasize, because I see that especially people going onto a spiritual journey and going deep and doing beautiful work, the moment they don't feel happy anymore in that way, and there's something really coming up, they might think, or many think, something is going wrong, and they don't dare to talk to anyone about it, because now they're meditating and now they're on the spiritual path, or they're teaching yoga or supporting people, and now they feel all of this. There's a lot of shame around it because of misunderstanding and not knowing. In our culture, there has been in other cultures always people supporting others through the dark night of the soul, because they knew the beauty of this and the intensity of this and the wisdom of it. And it also need that it's beautiful if it's supported, if we don't have to walk this all by ourselves, because it's intense, and it comes up in different intensities and not different for everybody, and can come in waves. But it's also important, I think, to bring this out for people to hear it, to know, to bring more understanding into the world about this. Because I see a lot of misunderstanding around this, of labeling it or starting to put it into some category of mental difficulties or depression or whatever, and it's really important to be very precise and to look deeper what's really happening there, especially people on a spiritual journey, turning the focus, going inwards. There's something happening there that is beautiful, but it's intense. And it has this frequency of sadness very often, like a deep sadness to it. Yeah, because something feels everything that we do, and every impact it has.
We have this sense of learning to identify with our feelings. So if something feels bad, it's wrong. And if something feels good, then it's right. And it's going beyond that. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying, like there's a fly or there's a mosquito, and there's a part of you that wants to just like, get it away. But there's an experience to that. I mean, other people talk about, even in, Viktor Frankl talks about the intensity and the immensity of the experience of being in a concentration camp. I mean, the most, like in the 20th century, like one of the most horrific things that anybody could live through, and the aliveness, the the intensity of that experience. Not that he forgave his perpetrators and wanted to be in that experience, but to also not identify and see that it means something, and because it's also, well, if I felt happy from meditating yesterday and I don't feel that today, well, then I've kind of gone back, I've failed, right? Whereas you're talking about it's that awareness.
Yes, yeah, and it's beautiful what you said, because going deeper into experiencing emotions, it's an energy, it's a frequency, it's one frequency of life force energy. And the moment we step out of the story and the labeling and all these ideas of, now I have to either get rid of this or hold on to it or whatever we do, and instead really dropping into it, and with this curiosity of a child exploring the world, what is really happening there inside of me. And actually, especially these emotions, like we would say, like a deep sadness or melancholy, it brings you into your heart. It has this effect. It's like sucking you in there. It's beautiful. The moment we allow it to do what it's wanting to do, where it wants to energetically, where it wants to lead us, the door it wants to open, or the path it shows us. So it is really an experiment of being human and looking at it from with fresh eyes, with dropping these concepts and being really curious what's really happening. I work a lot with people just going into the experience and, how you say, like being really curious and really detailed, really precise of what's really happening there. How is it moving? Is it hot, cold? Is it big, small? And because then something is shifting. Energy is starting to really flow, because we're not controlling it or suppressing it or holding on to it. We're going into it. It's like dropping into a river and allowing the river to flow while it takes you, and you feel the water and you see the scenery and you feel the shifts and changes. And it's an aliveness in that. It's a beautiful intensity, but we're not used to that intensity anymore. The intensity we see sometimes in children still, that can be in the intensity of a feeling, let it flow through, and then it shifts within half a minute, they're in a different expression, a different feeling, because they were not holding onto anything. They were not trying to make it more or less, or
Mm.
label it, or explain it, or find a reason and justify it, or be ashamed of it. They mirror something about this, and we can, with awareness and with choice, we can go even deeper than we could as a child, because this is like really growing up, is this bringing this awareness, this ability to reflect, to make conscious decisions, to co-create with life in that way.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I think that feels like a good place to end. There's still some tension and a sort of a desire to keep going, but I feel like there's a lot of aliveness in that.
Yes.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for your time, for the co-creation, the exploration here, and for being in this aliveness.
Thank you for holding this space and for sharing this aliveness with me. It was a real pleasure and an honor. And yeah, thank you for doing this work, this service.